Welcome to Rick's Europe. What's more dangerous, being called a racist or failing to protect a child from rape? For years, British authorities chose silence. They suppressed reports, ignored victims, and allowed grooming gangs, largely made up of men from Pakistani heritage, to continue abusing vulnerable girls, all in the name of political correctness. This scandal isn't just about safeguarding or the failed safeguarding, but it's about a political class more interested in protecting its image than its children. For over a decade, working class communities raised the alarm about grooming gangs operating with near impunity, but their voices were dismissed as racist, while left wing elites in town halls and media boardrooms looked the other way. Let's not ignore the elephant in the room. Mass migration without proper integration creates parallel societies. When cultural taboos around honor, gender, and race go unchallenged, grooming gangs thrive in the shadows. It's not about ethnicity, this is about accountability, law and order, and putting the protection of British girls before the fear of offending anyone. Any government that fails to do so has forfeited its moral authority. This horrible scandal is now finally being investigated. We're going to discuss some of the results that we see in this report. And to do that with me is the one and only Kenneth Morris. He is a British conservative commentator. He is part of the new think tank Center for Geopolitical Analysis. No, what was it? Geopolitical
Studies,
Studies,
geopolitical studies.
exactly.
Yeah,
And
that's the one.
he's also founder of Conservative Friends of Romania. Well, Kenneth, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Let's go to the beginning. We saw that now some articles came out, and your shadow minister for safeguarding has claimed that child rape cover ups occurred because people feared being labeled as racist, even more than they feared of failing to protect children. Now, I'm just thinking to myself, why is Has Phillips protecting these criminals? Because we are talking about criminals, over protecting those vulnerable girls.
Well, I think you've hit the nail on the head. And the Shadow Home Secretary, as well as you say, there's a huge problem in the UK to do with people sort of being afraid to speak the truth for fear of being labelled X, Y, or Z. It's really taken root in the UK very strong, this politically correct mindset. I think the crux of it that you've mentioned there is obviously to us, this relates to children. This is like an outrageous thing. Of course, you would protect the kids. But to the left, do they really care about your children or whatever? They're just political tools. I mean, if they cared so much about children, you'd hear them trying to support families to grow or this sort of thing. Instead, they say, no, if you get old and no one's there to look after you, we'll just bring in more people, and pay them very little and all the rest of it. And everyone loses in that sort of system. They just decriminalised or voted to attempt to decriminalise abortion, sort of randomly come out with this, and assisted suicides on the agenda. They really got a culture of death rather than life, and I think they don't really care about kids. What's, I suppose, unique about this situation is these kids are from families, or mostly have been from families and areas, towns in England that, across the United Kingdom, in fact, but certainly towns that we've considered to be like left behind. So these are kind of not considered by the establishment working class, but like underclass, they call it, sort of people where they live in an area with not much work, a lot of people on unemployment, a lot of drug use, this kind of thing. And these kind of people have been left behind by deindustrialization, by the change in the establishment. And they've sort of been ignored. And the left wing especially has considered in the past these people to be easy votes. They sort of generally voted Labour in these areas. And that has begun to change, of course, since Brexit and since people voted for the Conservatives to get Brexit done. And then, of course, now we have a lot of also reform support in these areas and so on. But effectively, these are people who've just been ignored. They haven't really had a cohesive voice in society. These are people that they could ignore. And, of course, they considered it was better to ignore than go the other way and expose what was happening, because that could lead to problems across the country if they're sort of policy on ignoring anything that goes wrong in ethnic minority communities, sort of try and keep the votes there as well. And ultimately, everyone loses. Every community loses when you ignore the truth. But yeah, effectively, it comes down to this, as you say, a fear of being called a racist or whatever, but also a sort of feeling that they can disregard these people and get away with it. And so it's a double win for them. They don't get called racist, and they disregard people that, they don't need to sort of poke that hornet's nest of all the problems that these people have. They'd rather just leave everything in the quiet, or even suppress the truth, and just get on with whatever else they want to do in London or whatever. It's a very sinister thing. That's what I'm trying to communicate there, but it goes quite deep.
I am shocked, but I'm not surprised at the same time. The arrogance and the way that these people that are still, true good people that are so vulnerable, they already are in a vulnerable position, are being treated. They are already in a very vulnerable position to be exploited. And like you said, they don't care. They just want to maintain this face that they're not racist, and they're still getting be elected. Now, thank God, there is a U-turn with Labour. They try to actually prevent this inquiry from taking. We can guess why. If you would ask me, I would say it's probably a cover-up, right? They don't want to have too much knowledge or investigation around because, there will be some people held responsible, hopefully. Victims were silenced. Report was suppressed, and the truth tellers were demonstrated. They were actually demonized as these racists. What changed? Why did you get eventually have these inquiries? Why only now?
I think there are a few things. The first thing I would say, which is quite interesting, is that we mustn't forget that when you don't deal with the problems that any community has, even the people in that community suffer as well. I mean, same with like FGM or forced marriage or anything like that. So it's absolutely crucial for everybody that this happens. Of course, this particular sinister kind of community on community violence, sexual violence, and so on is a particular case. But when it comes down to, as you say, the suppression and so on and so forth, and why has it changed now? Well, there have been a few things. I mean, over time, especially since Brexit, the people who politically didn't really find they had a voice, people have started to speak up for themselves a lot more since Brexit. They started to feel that maybe you can hold an opinion that the establishment doesn't hold, and maybe it's acceptable to communicate that opinion. The other thing is there's been huge pressure. I mean, the Conservative Party has been on about it in opposition for months now. Of course, Reform have done a huge push on this. You've seen other politicians, other political figures have really pushed. You had like fundraisers suggested, and fundraisers happened to sort of push inquiries into this. And the right wing and just the people have refused to let go of this. They've really refused. And of course, you've had the report just come out, which has basically exposed a bit more of the truth, if you want, and exposed the position of the government. And now it's given Starmer a position, a chance to change his position because he's got this report. He said, okay, because of this, I'm going to commission the U-turn. Ultimately, they really didn't want to have to go down this route because inevitably, we all know, it's going to lead to a lot of issues being exposed over years and years of community problems, of things perhaps we haven't even heard of. All sorts of horrors are going to come out, and ultimately, as Labour are the ones who've basically said you just got to shut up and take it, and anything we do is good, and you can't criticise anything. They're going to be the ones who will be in the biggest trouble for this. And if you want to think about political expediency, I think also Labour have realised that there's a genuine threat from their traditional sort of working class voter base, especially in the north, who really have said, look, we're not going to vote for you anymore. We're not just going to vote for you just because you're Labour. They've started to turn against, and you've seen Starmer change his rhetoric on immigration and all this sort of stuff, island of strangers, the nation of strangers, all that sort of stuff. So you've seen them really think, okay, we are about to lose a huge voter base, and so maybe it's expedient to try to appeal back to some of them. That's no doubt what they're playing as well. Whether we consider that they genuinely care about these people and what's happened is a very different matter. But I think politically, they can't let go. On a slightly unrelated note, you had a similar U-turn with like the winter fuel payments thing, which really disproportionately affected poor pensioners. The government, it doesn't really have any ideas on what it wants to do. So it's just throwing things out there. U-turns are to be expected. They've got a huge majority and no plan. And I think that this one has just become too much of a hot potato for them to ignore. We just haven't let go. And, the right-wing media, I think, is in quite a strong space now, and the alternative media, to keep the pressure on these issues going. So, yeah, I think they had no choice, really, especially after the report.
The Labour Party is trying to save face rather than actually doing good for the people that got them in power, which is something that we see very often. One thing that you said is that people now have this feeling that speaking out actually has an effect, that it can help them. Do you think Reform plays a role in that? Reform UK?
I mean, like, I'm an ardent conservative, but if you love your country, you've got to support whatever's right. And there's no doubt about it that a lot of people have seen Farage's work since Brexit as a very positive thing, has given a voice to the people. And yeah, I think Reform is really seen as like an anti-establishment vehicle that you can use to get across some of the policies that people want, but the establishment don't necessarily put on the menu. I mean, if you've got a two-party state and sometimes, even as a Tory, one could say that, we're always in this position where you can't give, you can never give everyone what they want, but certainly people have said, look, now it's got to a stage where perhaps what the people want is so divergent from what the two main parties have offered in the past that this gives a new, fresh perspective. It's a very understandable thing. And one thing we can say is that this is happening. And I think Reform has been a catalyst for a lot of these things. How that sort of works going forward, I think we'll see. But certainly on this particular issue, it's working. It's working, yeah, working well.
Another thing is that they actually knew that the criminals, the rapists, they were mostly from Asia and Pakistani. And from Pakistan, they're overrepresented, but they try to cover that up. That's betrayal first class from your government. And I'm just thinking about those poor girls that are marked for the rest of their lives. I am from the Netherlands. We had a very big scandal that was covered up by the government as well. A toeslagenaffaire, which led to thousands of kids being placed out of their homes because wrongfully the parents were marked as frauders. That's still something that is not fully resolved. I don't think it ever will be. I don't think the government wants to take full responsibility for that. And even though that, in essence, the scandal is different, it comes down to the same thing: the government trying to cover up what they did wrong, not really wanting to take responsibility for that. And I think it's very needed that there comes some sort of not justification, but some how to say that. Yeah, you want
Like
to
justice, I
have
guess.
justice,
Yeah.
you want to have justice for the wrong that's been doing, for those girls that had suffered unnecessarily when the government should have protected them. Do you think there will be something, or that the government can do something to give people that sense that there is some sort of justice?
I think the thing is, well, it depends what your views are on the death penalty, I suppose. But effectively, when we talk about justice, there are two factors here. I mean, on one side, obviously, you've got to punish the criminals. On the other side is, what about the public officials who facilitated this? What about all the individuals in the sort of various organizations of the state who allowed this to happen?
Yeah.
They've got to pay as well, right? And we saw, of course, recently with the, I don't know if you heard about the post office scandal, which is sort of more of a financial thing, but so many people persecuted and all the big sort of government mess up and everything. And, people do get the feeling, well, don't these people at the top kind of get away with it? And there's that's another side to it. Justice has to come with a system change as well, and with organizations being put in and systems being put in place that mean this can't happen again. And that's a big part of it. In terms of the damage done, on the one side, it's done. I mean, you can obviously, you've got to punish the criminals. You can give, I don't know, compensation to the individuals and the families affected and so on in terms of money. But there will be societal damage for, at least a generation or two from the effects of this sort of mass grooming gang activity. I mean, of course, people are psychologically damaged from this. You got serious problems there. You have to be addressed as well. So you have to deal with that. In terms of justice, have to go through the justice system. You need to get the people, take them to the courts, go through all that. That comes into another can of worms. Is people really feel that the public feels the courts aren't being harsh enough, or hard enough. It's not harsh, it's right. Hard enough on criminals. You've had all this earlier on. You had this talk from Labour. We don't have prison places, and so on and so forth. So there are like institutional issues there. Are we going to have enough prison spaces for these people so that everyone who needs to go in jail does, etc., etc.? So this is really a big thing. It goes right to the core of what's wrong with modern Britain, really. And we've built up such a debt to the truth by letting this go on for decades. It would be a monumental effort to even come close to resolving it in anything that looks like justice. But those are the things I've mentioned, I think would be a good start. That's what I can say.
Actually, Faraj says in an op-ed for GB News this week, and I will quote him right now, "I worry that the scope of this inquiry won't be long enough. I worry that the Home Secretary has said it will take 3 years, so I wonder whether they could just push it past the date of the next election. And I want to ask you at home, is this inquiry a con? Are we being led up the garden path?" Well, are we being led up the garden path, Kenneth? What's your take?
Well, I mean, I'll put it this way: as much as we don't, we don't trust this current government so much, and of course, as conservatives, I suppose, as British citizens, a lot of people don't trust this government's word on practically anything. At the same time, if they appoint independent people, of course, what Labour considers to mean to be meant by independence is another thing. But anyway, we have to have hope. I mean, you've got to try something. At the end of the day, if they do delay it up until the next government, I'm pretty sure they're going to lose that next election, God willing. The next government will be a right-wing government and have to deal with it themselves. It's gone on for 20, 30 years. Why not wait a few more years if we have to? Of course, I'd rather do it now. But I mean, if they do con us, they're going to lose a lot of political capital that way. You know what I mean? And also, inevitably, the issues need to be faced. Every year is a loss. I mean, if you've got problems where certain communities have certain issues within them, it goes right to this core of any country, say if you took Pakistan, for example, as a country, that's got multiple ethnic groups, multiple, interpretations of the national religion, multiple lifestyles and whatever. And of course, the government's going to say, well, this community might have this strengths and weaknesses and so on and so forth. You have to deal pragmatically. We have to deal realistically. Also in the UK, we have to do that. And I mean, that obviously this goes again to the core of issues with law and order in the country. We've got inefficient policing, and really, if you ask the average British person what their worry is in their day-to-day life, if they're being honest, they'll tell you it's law and order more than anything. Yeah. Economy is always up and down in the UK, but I mean, law and order, people don't feel safe in big cities. All these things, politically, this is what you're touching upon. Now, when it comes back to the victims of this horrific scandal, I mean, they're not going to forget what's happened. And this is not an issue that they're just going to say, okay, well, if Labour do this policy, this is going to outweigh this, and this. No, it's like this is a serious, crucial, fundamental issue that these people are going to keep going, and their families and people who know about it. We're not going to just let go of this. This is beyond the ordinary. This is a serious violation. Not only of those girls themselves, but the dignity of those communities and those families and so on and so forth. Of course, if Labour don't do a good job of it, then that's their problem. They're done for, I think, politically speaking.
Interestingly, Farage wrote an op-ed and he said, and I will quote him on this, "I worry that the scope of this inquiry won't be long enough. I worry that the Home Secretary has said it will take 3 years. So I wonder whether they could just push it past the date of the next election. And I want to ask you at home, is this inquiry a con? Are we being led up the guard path? Well, are we, Kenneth? What's your take on that?
So, like I say with these things, public trust in Labour government is very low. I don't think we can really take them at their word at the best of times. But at the end of the day, if they appoint independent advisors, if they are independent and whatever, it's worth getting something started. This is certainly a good thing. It's better than nothing. It's at least a public admission that something is wrong here by the government, going along with the Casey report. So, I mean, we'll have to wait and see. But if they do mess around over the next 3 or 4 years, they'll be punished, by the electorate. And when the right-wing government comes in at the next general election, I'm sure whoever's in power will be, well placed to do what the people want, to actually carry out a full and frank report. So really, you're just delaying the inevitable. And if Labour were hoping to save some votes by conceding on this matter, I don't think people are going to forget. The victims aren't going to forget. The British people aren't going to forget in a few years' time if this matter just disappears off their agenda or whatever. This is going to have to be seen through to its full conclusion. So I think Labour would lose a lot by doing that. I wouldn't put it past them to play around with this, but like I say, this is going nowhere. This issue.
And what is the link between illegal migration and a grooming gang?
So it's an interesting one. I mean, this particular study, or we got this latest report by Baroness Casey, it's like nearly 200 pages odd report. I think that's worth diving into, anyone that's interested. Effectively, this particular sort of set of the grooming gang scandal really relates to sort of inter-ethnic sort of sexual violence, really, where groups of young men are getting together and sort of targeting, these young, usually what they call white British girls in these communities. That's sort of the crux of it. When it comes to illegal migration, I mean, I'm sure there were some illegal people involved as well, but I think where that goes and where problems with illegal migration come in is the state's position at the moment under Labour when it comes to the boat scandal in the English Channel, managing illegal migration or not managing it, mismanaging it at the moment. It all comes down to the same problem that we have with the grooming gang scandal. And that's this idea that you can't criticise any issue that relates to immigration or communities and so on and so forth, and ethnic minority issues or whatever that might exist in those communities. You can't mention it, you can't touch it, to the point where now, even with illegal migration, the government's basically saying we've lost control. We can't do anything anyway. And this feeds into it. It's exactly the same sort of attitude, this sort of blasé, nonchalant, we can't do anything anyway thing that led to the grooming gang situation. But of course, they're quite eager to apply the full force of the law on anything perceived as right-wing or far-right or whatever, social media posts, of course, being the one that really does the rounds in England at the moment. Everyone's afraid to post on social media in case they look too right-wing and get arrested or whatever. So they're okay to cultivate a culture of fear with the average citizen, whoever they may be. But when it comes to illegal immigration, which is one of the big problems we have in Britain at the moment, and then, of course, the grooming gang situation, it all comes back to that kind of don't touch this issue. It's a key part of their voter base, is basically saying to ethnic minority communities is that we're your party, even though they do nothing for ethnic minority communities. Hence why they started to lose a lot of ethnic minority votes, especially from people who like the traditional family or who build a business or any kind of random, traditionally right-wing issue you could think of. Is many people, Labour are realising they're losing on both fronts. They're not appealing to ethnic minorities who are usually more socially conservative. They're not appealing to their traditional working class voter base who've been let down, looked down upon and just attacked effectively by Labour, betrayed by them. So I think politically it's all a big mess that Labour have made for themselves. Illegal migration sort of slots into it in that way.
Well, they're actually digging their own grave. This might actually be beneficial for reform, but if that's so, please keep us posted. Kenneth, for the future, where can people follow your work best?
Well, I'm sort of here, there, and everywhere these days, but I would say we'll hopefully be appearing more with your good self and the like on the media. And I guess I'll give you some links if you can put with a video or something to the stuff that we do. As you know, I do a lot of stuff in Eastern Europe as well with the elections and with what's going on with the European Union.
I was basically asking what's your Twitter?
Oh yeah, my Twitter is Kenneth Morris 7. Yeah, that's the way to get me on Twitter.
That's perfect. Thank you so much for viewers for watching, and thank you so much, Kenneth, for really taking the time and give us this deep and thorough analysis.
My pleasure. Thanks very much.